A History of the Ronde, Part 4, Civil Service. It's the winter of 1968. A 1,000-acre frozen sliver of man-made land lies dormant between the waters of the St. Lawrence River. On these grounds sits an abandoned, glaciated city with an uncertain future that lies at the mercy of its ambitious, cosmopolitan, and still growing parent, Montreal. A place that once welcomed over 50 million visitors during Expo 67, only 6 months prior, and the center of the world's attention that year, in a short time rendered a fossil of the success seen despite the risk of holding the event in the first place. As Montreal neared the threshold of what to do with their massive billion-dollar showcase, it made no sense to demolish the entire site. Thus the decision was made to carry it forward in a watered-down version of its forebearer. The site also, if it were to be continued, needed a new name, as its original was trademarked. After the more than 50 million attendees of Expo 67 had left, a flurry of problems were immediately unearthed from its success. Much like the buildings over the 1,000-acre site, little planning of what to do with them afterwards was taken, and the Expo 67 site was hastily shuttered while plans for what to do next were considered by the city of Montreal. What would be done with the site, who would run it, and what it would be named all had to be determined quickly.
What in the world is going on? So much that's new at Man and His World, Montreal, Canada.
It would eventually be decided that Man and His World would be the official moniker for the event going forwards, and will be referred to as MHW going forwards in this film. Given the public aspects of MHW and Ronde, much of the plans for the grounds were disclosed in advance through public meetings, something relatively unseen with other theme parks. Much of the attractions at the park were privately owned, including La Spirale. The towering iconic ride may have forced the city of Montreal to make public their aggressive plans seeking to purchase it, and they were quickly able to strike a deal payable in installments over 5 years. Man and His World 1, as it was to be known, opened in the summer of 1968 on a shoestring budget compared to its emergent predecessor. The most notable of these cutbacks was a lack of fireworks through the evenings that annoyed many visitors expecting the luster of the prior year's activities. The theme park Ronde, however, would retain the very name it had opened with, but the name would resonate longer through the years than the international showcase of its neighbor. The 135-acre Ronde had a leg up on attractions versus MHW, as it would serve as the main competitor for traditional thrills and family entertainment in Montreal with Parc Belmont, the already established trolley-style park on the other side of the island city. Ronde and MHW were an altogether different operation to what today is considered normal practice for theme park operations. All the lands, buildings, and infrastructure of the site was owned and maintained by the city of Montreal. Even during the previous year's expo, the entire complex ran as a for-profit operation. All of the concessions, eateries, and attractions were contracted through private entities, whom represented a cross-section of hospitality and entertainment professionals of the city. Many of the flat rides at Ronde were split between fairground operators running their machines on-site for the duration of the season. Restaurants would often see yearly changes, as different tastes and restaurateurs offered rotating cuisines during the event. These restaurants, in turn, would pay a percentage of their profits to the city. Ronde was no normal amusement park, but it would still resonate and have an influence on the visitors it served, something that would last throughout their lives and for generations to come. Many would have their first ice cream, first roller coaster ride, first family gathering, first chance to stand up to their fears, first kiss, discover their first love, and many others in the first years of the park's life. When the park opened in 1967, it featured 27 rides. Many of these were not permanent fixtures at the park and could find themselves packed up in the off-season to run in other locations only to return the next, or in many cases, not returning at all. Among the Ronde's impressive lineup at the start of the 1968 season, all had returned from the previous year. Among these were Le Galopant. This Belgian-made steam-powered carousel dating from 1885, which was brought to the park from the New York World's Fair for $75,000. Gyrotron, the infamous Movator ride, once championed as the park's signature attraction. Built by Von Rule, with a design and theming by famed Irish set designer Sean Kenny, Gyrotron's original theme was to take guests on a journey into space, followed by a descent into the depths of Earth through a volcano. With a final total cost of $3 million Canadian at its opening, $26.5 in 2022, Gyrotron was the most expensive ride ever produced. The ride had received a barely enthusiastic reception its opening year, and it was quickly popular opinion that Gyrotron was an astronomical disaster. In February, far in advance of the reopening of Ronde, it was announced that Gyrotron would feature a new lighting package and interior effects in order to liven up the relaxed experience many park goers expected. La Marche du Mille Pattes is one of 4 aerodynamics attractions originally built for the park. This revolutionary family roller coaster was the newest incarnation of the company's tubular steel track technology developed for the Matterhorn coaster at Disneyland. Calypso, a Huss rotating gondola flat ride. The Ferris wheel, known as Le Grand Roue, located by Lac Dauphin. Joyeux Mousillon, a rub-a-dub boat ride. Choo Choo, also manufactured by Aerodynamics, is a children's ride where guests journey along a weaving track through the countryside on their own powered locomotive. Voyage à la Lune, a Schwarzkopf ghost train. Hofbrauhaus, a Schwarzkopf funhouse. The Mini Rail, one of the most popular attractions through Expo 67. Laurent's portion of the mini rail snaked a circular path through the park's grounds and had 2 stations, one in Old Quebec at the north and another in Fort Edmonton at the southern front section of the park. A completely automated and driverless system that was unheard of at the time. In fact, in order to put riders at ease that may have been nervous of the lack of a driver, false ones were installed on every train in the early days of the service's life. There were originally 3 lines for the mini rail running throughout the grounds of Expo 67, partial sections of which were built for the prototype mini rail constructed for the Swiss National Exhibition of 1964. The formerly mentioned Spiral, a space tower ride built by Willy Brewer Space Towers, with a dual-level observation platform built by Von Rule. The attraction was a permanent fixture flat ride consisting of the platform which rotated around a central spire towering 73 meters or 285 feet above the park. At its base was the vast Carrefour Market and dining area. The tower, at over 330 feet, was the tallest ride of its kind at the time of its introduction. La Pitoune, a classic and among the first of Aerodynamics log flumes. It was met with wide acclaim on its opening. In fact, it's safe to say that when Montrealers think of classic La Ronde, they think of a ride on La Pitoune, providing torrents of glee to the point that the ride became a favorite spot for photos of many familiar faces over the years. Les Bagnoles, an Aerodynamics antique family-powered car ride. Téléphérique, a gondola-style ride manufactured by Von Rule, which ascended guests across Lac Dauphin, or Lake Dolphin, with a station located near the main gate and another at the rear section of the park near the second gate and Vieux, Quebec. Spider, a commonly found portable octopus ride. Turbulent, another common spinning flat-top ride built by chance. Bobsled, a Schwarzkopf Baron Curve-style high-speed flat ride. Sprung Chance, a Mack Rides bouncing flat ride. Les Parasols, a paratrooper ride. La Ronde's ride operators were able to offer new for that year the Russian Mountain, a Schwarzkopf Wildcat roller coaster. Located next to the Gyrotron, this 50 feet tall clone design found itself in fairgrounds around the world, yet still served as the biggest thrill for most guests that year. Admission to MHW that year cost $350 for a day visa, with the park retaining the famous passport system introduced with Expo 67. A season-long visa cost $5, which itself did not allow for admission into La Ronde. That would cost a further 50 cents per day for adults and 25 cents for children. Mark Scala, head of rides and amusement at MHW, had seen many problems, even before La Ronde's second season could mature, and posted a private memorandum to MHW's head of operations, while simultaneously threatening to resign from his post. Scala then went on to make a statement through council, claiming the park was due to wither away, and that the city lacked the funds for new investments and rides to attract visitors back to the park. Scala suggested that the rights to run the park be sold to a private company and that a percentage of profits could then be issued back for the city. While seemingly radical at the time, Scala would prove prophetic, suggesting a model for the future of the park that would actually be adopted decades later. Police based at their dedicated station on the island declared a no-tolerance policy for hippies that were congregating at the islands and in some reports harassing guests. Property rights to all the islands that make up MHW were sold to the city of Montreal for $1 in agreement that the space would be perpetually used as a public area and park grounds. By late August, Montreal Mayor Jean Drapeau announced that MHW would return the following year with a focus on returning 50 to 75% of the pavilions from 1968. 1969. La Ronde reopened its gates on May 17th, starting with weekend-only operations, while MHW prepared to reopen 3 weeks later. When it does open, MHW2 is still running as a mini expo, opening later than previous editions on June 12th till October 6th. Several new nations take part, with 90% of the exhibition space changed, creating a virtually different experience than the previous edition. This was a necessity, as the original construction and ad hoc basis of the expo created a lack of space for storage of many of the exhibits through the off-season. Many of the pavilions they were housed in were not built to survive the winter or be used on a permanent basis. The concessions and vendors of La Ronde and MHW, especially those operating restaurants, took issue prior to the coming season with the structure of their agreements with the city of Montreal. In light of a struggling 1968 season, these were changed, notably to rent only for restaurant spaces, the rate of which was based on the 3 strongest months of the previous season. Le Moulin de la Saucier, a Pinfari dark ride, opened as the newest attraction that year. It's also the first season where the park introduced a pay-one-price ride-all-day wristband, which cost $2.50 each. The Gyrotron returned on May 29th with yet another complete remodel of its interior, with crystalline effects, the park managers promising to bombard riders with explosions of reflected light, desperate as they were to have an experience worthwhile for the costly gamble. The grounds throughout La Ronde and MHW would see various changes year on year to keep the offerings new and attract returning visitors. Late in the season, as La Ronde returned to weekend-only operations to close out the year, despite being closed post-Labor Day, MHW could still be toured by guests via official park vehicles, which cost guests $5 per hour to tour the closed buildings of the grounds. The season closed with the park taking in 1.3 million visitors, with a total of $739,498 in profit. 1970. Over 4 years, La Ronde was beginning to mature. 76,000 attended that season's opening weekend, and it was clear that the still fresh park remained a major draw for Montrealers. Some of the food offerings among the park's 28 that year included the stalwart Expo 67 originating Koliba Slovak restaurant, which imported their chefs yearly from Czechoslovakia, as it was known at the time, a Saint-Hubert barbecue, the Klondike Steakhouse in Fort Edmonton, and a couple of German beer gardens rounded out the selection. There were also additional originating bars such as the Silver Garter, formerly Golden Garter, and British Bulldog Pub. Les Jardins des Étoiles, the Garden of Stars, was transformed into a permanent nightclub that ran year-round. The $3 to $4 price of admission allowed for bleacher or table seating, which included admission to MHW. That year saw 31 rides open at La Ronde, with a few new additions, chief among them being the Zipper, the famous chance traveling ride, finding a permanent home at La Ronde. The opening of Gyrotron that year, however, was delayed to June 12th, while the third revamp of its interior effects was completed in a further attempt to once again make the ride more thrilling for guests. The children's area was revamped and expanded along with the addition of Mini Bang, a junior bumper cars. A miniature golf course was also added that season. Overall, MHW was a year-by-year consideration by the City of Montreal, and by the end of that summer, it was announced that opposed to the previous years, Ronde would close after Labor Day, along with the rest of the grounds. It was also noted that this was a financial consideration, and it was proposed that opening earlier in the year to serve the more eager Montreal public in the spring was more suitable. Despite this, at the close of the season, an unnamed official disclosed that winter operations were being considered, particularly at Ronde, as many of the buildings were winter ready. Ice skating and other winter activities were mentioned to be considered. 1971. In 1971, Ronde opened its gates to record crowds on May 16th, debuting the Turbo Ride. A non-union showcase of musicians and bands is announced to take place at Ronde in the opening weekends of the season for a regular feature spot at the park throughout the summer, in what was to be an acrimonious gesture to unions and the start of many union-related disputes at the park over the years with the City of Montreal. The Alcan Pavilion, the separately run aquarium and dolphin show arena, was opened all year round on Wednesdays through Sundays from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. with 3 shows daily of the dolphin display at 1:30, 2:30, and 3:30. 1972. La Course. A Zierflitzer roller coaster returns that season, creating a formidable permanent roller coaster offering along with Matage Russe at Ronde for the first time. A manual workers' strike is called in late May, rendering the opening of MHW and Ronde an impossibility. Ronde was foreseen as having less problems reopening when it could than MHW after the dispute. In mid-August, the Bavarian Beer Garden, one of the most popular attractions in all of MHW, burns down, with the city making the swift decision to rebuild the popular attraction for use the next year. This would be the last season to see the Expo Express train in use. The Rabbit Transit rail system, was stationed above the main gate of Ronde, was taken out of service officially in October of that year. It would take only a few years for nearly all traces of the system to disappear from the grounds, including a large garage and train storage area next to the entrance of the theme park and Alcan Aquarium. 1973. After its first 6 years of operation, Montrealers were still not assured of the permanence of Ronde, nor of its mother theme park, Man and His World. But 257,808 attendees over the season's first 6 preview weekends proved that there remained a high demand, and their early season opening philosophy paid off. The complete grounds of Ile Saint-Helens and Mini Rail were open that year. The smaller yellow mini rail journey costing 25 cents, with the blue journey 75. It would be the last time visitors could enjoy it and many MHW attractions, as most would not survive to the next year. The entirety of Ile Notre Dame was closed at the start of the season to undergo a massive transformation for the upcoming 1976 Olympic Games. The construction of the regatta complex for the Olympics meant the demolition of several iconic pavilion buildings. Admission to Man and His World was reserved to surviving pavilions on Ile Saint-Helens was free. However, a visa for the pavilions and exhibitions was $2.50, $5 for a season's pass admission till Labor Day. A reconstruction of a traditional Quebec settlement village was constructed that season at MHW. The revolutionary light, sound, and dance show Lanterna Magica returned to Ronde that year, housed in its own on-site dedicated theater next to Lake Dolphin, with a new performance dubbed Circus of Clowns. A multimedia presentation utilizing everything from multi-screens, or Cinerama as it was known, live actors, music, and other effects. 1974. The mid-70s saw Ronde settle into life as a permanent fixture in Montreal, with little major incident occurring at the park of note. Despite this, and better than expected attendances year on year, the exposition was still seeing only 5% of its original 1967 attendances, which made the site of MHW next to impossible to sustain. Each year, with only a dozen or so nations taking part on average, the exposition site began to see rapid deterioration. Many disused and quickly rendered defunct buildings were torn down. The visitor to the site in its first years would notice substantial losses, including by that year both the mini rails located on the MHW site. 1975. Likely to help boost attendances at MHW for the first time, full season and day visa holders were granted free admission to Ronde. Meanwhile, a fire breaks out at the Ontario Pavilion at MHW, destroying the roof and consequently the entire structure. One of the most memorable and visited pavilions during the expo, the site's original exterior design would be recreated on site many years later. 1976. The ride offerings at Ronde reach a peak that season with 46 attractions. A new display in the Gyrotron titled Man, the Creator of Beauty, of Artistry, and of Fantasy debuted at a cost of $550,000, a quarter of the original price of the ride. Produced by Jaroslav Frick, director of the renowned Czechoslovakian Audiovisual Center. By then it was the fourth reimagining of the interior of the ride. Another unfortunate incident sees Buckmeister Fuller's famous and iconic American Pavilion's outer skin wall, a synthetic surface wrapped around the spherical structure, catch fire brilliantly. While the skin is completely destroyed, the pavilion itself remains intact. That season saw MHW close out the year with 3.5 million visitors. The City of Montreal forms a private corporation to manage the operations of MHW, while a private security firm takes over policing and security, leading to the end of the park's on-site station for the Montreal Urban Community Police. After 10 years, MHW that season was granted a record operating budget of $13.5 million, running up a $6 million deficit by season's end. Les Aquas Délices, a new seafood restaurant located in the village de Québécois, opens that year. On July 10th, MHW decides to hold a complimentary admission day for anyone with the surname Lajoie. About 700 Lajoies show up to mingle with presumably newfound relations. August 31st of that year was to be amongst the most anticipated and profitable for the park, the reason being a joint promotion with a local radio station and McDonald's, with 25,000 children expected to descend on the park for free. With free admission, it was presumed the concessions run by independent entrepreneurs would benefit, and they consequently ordered plenty of stock to be ready for what was anticipated to be a busy day of sales. Civil workers of the City of Montreal, however, had different plans. Reports that morning from some concession stands were that large blue-collar men were roaming the grounds and forcibly informing everyone that they were not to open for the day. A short time later, power to the entire island was cut, and every restaurant, ice cream stand, hot dog cart, and beer hall quickly saw their precious stock under threat from lack of refrigeration, and in the case of the facilities themselves, forced to run powerless. Those that were in the park by then, at around 10 a.m., were quickly informed that the park was in fact closed. Rides sat idle as children, bored with inactivity, threatened to climb buildings and rides. The park was swiftly sunk into general chaos as the Civil Workers Union strike caused the entire park to shut down immediately at the start of its operating day. Mayor Jean Drapeau, in a tirade possibly intended to influence negotiations, blamed the workers for leaving 25,000 children stranded. Protesters shouted and harassed those willing to confront them at the gates of the site, which was blocked and rendered inaccessible from the city by noon. Many vendors lamented thousands of dollars lost in revenue as a result of the strike, which was eventually resolved, but not before thousands of young guests were forced to leave disappointed. The incident overall endures as one of the most chaotic days in Ronde's history. 1978. Gyrotron, once the feature attraction, championed as a revolutionary experience of its time, the most expensive dark ride produced up to that point in 1967, and the most expensive ever in Canadian history, was permanently closed. Before anyone could ride it, the Gyrotron was promised as the most exhilarating experience available at Expo 67. Instead, none that rode it offered an impression other than boredom, which led to several reimaginings of the ride over its short lifespan. Sadly, the Gyrotron would never achieve anything near its original expensive goal, and tragically, before even the end of the ride's short life, its chief designer, Sean Kenny, passed away from a heart attack at the early age of 43. 1979. On May 5th, the park opens for its 12th season with an overture of cannon fire. No one could expect that it would in fact be the most explosive season the park had ever seen, seeing tragic incidents throughout the year. For more on the tragic events of 1979, be sure to watch the companion video, Terror on Lake Dolphin, of which there will be a link at the end of this film. 1980. Attendance at MHW that year topped 2.6 million, with a further 1.4 million visiting Ronde, leading to 9 million in revenue overall for the season. The Floralise, an international floral exhibit, is held on the grounds of MHW that year, which helped boost attendance at both parks that season. Another workers' strike hits the park that year, however. At the Alcan Aquarium, the strike led to dolphin trainers being forced to temporarily abandon their positions. All 4 of the facility's performing dolphins, through habit, became accustomed to feeding by their trainers, and given their absence led the dolphins to ignore the automatic feeding system available to them. After 38 days, These circumstances led to the death of all 4 of the performing dolphins. The well-documented incident resulted in the first step towards a phasing out of the aquarium and immediate closure of the dolphin show, since only one of the non-performing dolphins survived the ordeal. 1981. The Super Visa was introduced at Man in His World for the start of the 1981 season. The visa allowed access to every ride at Ronde and every pavilion. With the added incentive, Ronde visitors easily surpassed 10 million rides that year. A season's pass for MHW was $15. A day pass just for the exhibition was $6, and the all-access Super Visa with unlimited rides was $9.95. General admission to Ronde itself was only $1. More super than that was the season's introduction of the first permanent major roller coaster edition, Super Menachem. At 75 feet in height and 2,400 feet in length, it was an imposing new attraction. The Vekoma corkscrew coaster was installed possibly to keep the park competitive, with a new theme park opening in Toronto that year, Canada's Wonderland. Menachém's introduction proved to be successful, with attendance at MHW that year topping 1.2 million, with a further 1.5 million at Ronde. The theme park's attendance for the first time that season beating out its larger sister park. MHW and Ronde collectively earned 11 million in revenue that year. 1982. General admission to Ronde is raised to $2.50, which includes 2 free rides. Admission for seniors, however, for the first time ever is free. That season, MHW ran with a deficit of 7.7 million, in excess of the 5.9 million allotted by the city's operating budget. Despite efforts and restructuring to keep it a relevant attraction, a financial problem was becoming unavoidable with the aging exposition. Ronde's attendance was also down significantly from the previous season after the introduction of Menachem. There were still investments coming in at the park, with that year's new flat ride edition being a Huss enterprise. A crackdown on drug use on the park's grounds leads to substantial tree cutting along the pathways of Ronde, leading to more open areas in places where drug use by young guests was known to take place. You could smell it, as Charles Rodier, director of surveillance, stated, while indicating that management of crowds would be increased that year. It was also decided halfway through the season to permanently close many of the unused pavilions at Man in His World. This would officially signal the end of the exposition grounds as a major attraction and see most of the still standing unused pavilions simply left to decay, unprotected from the conditions of Montreal's harsh winters. 1983. For the 1983 season, Ronde introduces a zero flying carousel into its flat ride lineup. Les Autotamponeuses, the first version of a permanent bumper cars ride under that name, also opens that year. The main addition for the thrill-seeking public was Arc-en-Ciel, a Huss rainbow flat ride that soared riders 85 feet into the air. The following year would need to be a significant one for MHW and Ronde, as crowds over 1983 were once again dwindling. 1984 would also be an opportune year given the late announcement that Parc Belmont would be closing its doors. Ronde now found itself as the only major thrill destination for the Montreal public. While Man in His World was nearing its permanent end, Ronde would go on to flourish and see its greatest days just on the horizon. 1984. The 1984 season saw Ronde undergo a massive facelift after 17 previous years of operation, debuting 6 new attractions, including 3 new adult rides, chief among them being Boomerang, a Vekoma boomerang, and the second ever constructed, intended to be built at Tivoli in the Canary Islands, a park that was experiencing financial problems. Boomerang, as it would continue to be named at Ronde, would be the second major roller coaster addition to the park in 3 years, and instantly proved to be both a hit with park guests and iconic for Ronde and its skyline. Boomerang, along with a Vekoma giant Ferris wheel, were bought in a fire sale and shipped to Ronde to debut that season. The Grand Rue, as it was to be named, at 148 feet tall, with 40 gondolas, opened next to the north entrance near the Quebec Village. Also to debut that year was the Spaceship, as well as 3 new children's rides from Santori. The entire overhaul of the park that year cost $6 million and may have contributed to a later opening than usual the weekend of June 9th and 10th. Admission was $13 for adults and $11 on Wednesdays, and $8 for children and $7 on Wednesdays. regular access to the park with a complimentary ride on the mini rail or teleferique, along with access to Garden of the Stars for separately ticketed shows, was $4. These increases, in some cases more than 30%, were not taken lightly by the press or city councillors. Michael Feinstadt took issue with the increase in council, claiming the move was a determined one meant to squeeze out lower-income families in favor of more well-to-do ones. It was a legitimate complaint given the closure of Park Belmont, itself known as a destination for lower and middle-income families, now with no other major destination to entertain them. MHW featured exhibits from 25 countries that year, a substantial increase than previous, with many new outdoor and recreational offerings. Jardin des Étoiles featured the ultra-modern disco on weekend nights from 10 p.m. and 9 p.m. on weekdays, and every Sunday night at 10 p.m. there were fireworks over Lake Dolphin. A film about two guys and two girls on the last day of summer before school starts. They meet at the amusement park, and while they're there, a diamond is stolen at a raffle and is hidden inside a stuffed animal. This was the description of Fun Park by the film's producer, Peter Kunenberg, to be shot entirely at Ronde. Announced in late January by Filmline, a Montreal production company with plans for 6 feature film productions based in the city. By late June, Fun Park began production, now helmed by its second director, James Orr. Shooting was done mainly over the evenings for 4 weeks. Near the end of the operating season, through a combination of ever-thinning crowds, growing expenses, differing tastes, and decaying infrastructure, it was announced that after 17 years, the attraction Man and His World would close forever. By then, most of the awe, modernism, and glamour that bestowed the grounds of Expo 67 had been lost to weathering and neglect over time, and the site had become a futuristic eyesore, emphasized by the ground's increased popularity for dystopian science fiction film and television productions. The Expo era had reached sunset, what had given life to a collection of islands through innovative minds and determined hands. Memory of their creation, the most modern of cities, by the mid-1980s, mainly remained only at Ronde, surviving as a place for families and lovers, friends and stragglers, perhaps meeting for the first time and sharing moments they'll cherish forever. With no major incidents and a busy season behind them, and a record number of attractions opened in a newly refurbished park, it seemed that the future was very bright for Ronde. Guests could easily expect a tamer year to follow in 1985, with 3 glittering major new attractions already in place. The city of Montreal, however, had an aggressive and expansive strategy at play. Grounds were already being cleared at both ends of the park in large areas, while the Gyrotron building was being dismantled and sold for scrap. There were even larger changes coming for Ronde, some of which would become the most significant in the park's history. A monster of a season was on the horizon.